My dear fellow listeners, good evening once again, and welcome to another edition of Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat is a Canadian initiative with a global impact. There are a few different ways to listen to us. You can listen to us on a regular dial. That's the radio, 102.7 CKMS FM. You can listen to us on TV as well, for those of you who have the Rogers digital box on channel 946. And of course, we are live streaming our chit chat here. So do take the opportunity to share our page. We ask you to stay with us if you like to learn a thing or two. But if you're looking for an opportunity to vent out negativity, this is not for you. Tonight, we have from Guyana, Nyall Jodhan, who will take the opportunity to share some of the pieces when it comes to the recounting of ballots in Guyana. And we'll talk in details, of course, but we want to give him the opportunity to introduce himself. We do have a few questions for him, but we want to focus a little bit, on the recounting in Guyana, the ballots, that is, because different sides are seeing it differently. So it will be nice to get some input from somebody who has actually been part of that recounting. So Nyall, welcome to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. How are you doing tonight?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thank you very much, Narine Dat, for having me and inviting me onto your program. Good evening, everybody.
All right. So what you can do for us, for people who don't know you, I mean, I know who you are. Take a minute or so, introduce yourself to us, and then we are going to get right into some of the questions we have for you. But take your time, let people know where you're born, things of that nature, and we'll get right into it.
All right. So I am a Guyanese by birth, born in Georgetown. I grew up in Georgetown. I went to Stella Maris Primary, then went on to St. Stanislaus College Secondary. Would have done tertiary studies at the University of Guyana, majoring in computer science, and have been in the IT industry working for most of my life in the IT industry. So that's my background primarily, very technical.
Okay, good, excellent. So you have a technical background, you're an IT guy. So my question for you though, so why politics? Because I mean, you you were a candidate obviously for the Citizenship Initiative Party. And then I'm not sure if that was your first experience in that, but IT background and wanting to be part of politics, which is very interesting because we need all kinds of skills when it comes to politics, by the way. So why you decided to put your hat in that ring, so to speak?
I, as many Guyanese, have always been interested in politics. Most Guyanese, it's a conversation topic that we're all involved in and always interested, and we all have our own opinions and so. So I actually, growing up, was a bit more interested in politics and what's going on, having been involved in volunteering in this scout group and helping to educate youths. And so I always took an active interest in how the social aspects of development of Guyana, how can we better ourselves? And so I paid attention to the politics of the country and would have experienced myself and also having chats with the various youths from the different parts of the country. And so because of the background, come to understand a lot of the issues that we face. And a lot were similar to mine. And they, surprisingly, you're always a bit surprised to find out that other people, of different backgrounds, have the same kind of struggles and things that bother them in life about life. So for me, it was always how can we get better as a people? So I paid attention to the politics. The Citizenship Initiative is my first official party representation, but it's not my first involvement in politics. I would have become involved in the background, but directly with when AFC would have first formed up. That third force identity, the differentiation between, apart from the two big parties, the recognition that two big parties have for decades controlled the direction of Guyana, the policies, and not necessarily the direction that Guyana needed to be taken. So I always thought that a different perspective, a different bunch of leaders were needed, and would have started getting involved when the FC formed, assisting them local in my area, to spread the message of thought, force politics, tell people in the area that we need change away from the big two. So when they formed up, nothing much came out of the first election that they were in. But in 2011, they were able to get quite a few more seats, quite a few more votes from my area.
Okay.
And then in 2015, when they coalesced with the APNU, and they formed the coalition, became even more involved with there were quite a few satellite groups of young, dedicated, interested people who were very much disenchanted with the PPP rule and the way things were going. And I would have fallen with, I fell in with a core group of these people, and we more or less assisted greatly with the social media campaign for the coalition. So again, I wasn't formally a candidate or representative, or so it was just civic interest in promoting the thought force and the need to get a change from PPP.
So
yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Right. So that was the superseded my interest into getting more involved in politics. Now, after the coalition would have won in 2015, I went into power. I personally would have been very disappointed with some of the things that they would have done very early on, and then their deviation away from the direction and their campaign promises that got us young people all excited and very hopeful for positive growth in Guyana. And after, soon after, when they deviated with the numerous things they did and made quite a lot of disappointing decisions, I realized, it's the PPP coin, but flipped onto the same side, and you learn very quickly that they're both same sides of the same coin, as I like to say. So I started again looking for an alternative, and would have went to a couple other parties that formed up their initial meetings, but until the Citizenship Initiative launch, I had not seen a platform that was totally independent and with a bunch of people who I would have known along the years and would have campaigned or worked with for the coalition and along the years that had stood very separately, very independently from either of the two big parties, and that is what I liked. I wanted to be part of something that could hold itself separate and apart, and that is how I came to join up with the Citizenship Initiative.
All right. So I'm going to stop you there because I know you've been thank you for sharing that, by the way, but because you have firsthand experience when it comes to the recounting and all of that, I want to take full advantage of that to get some input as to what went on and all of that. Because I mean, me watching, all the pieces, from, North America here, and people watching, and we are seeing different things, we're hearing different things from different people. So one of the very first question I have for you regarding this whole recounting piece here, and please take the opportunity to shed some light so that we have some good understanding. I was told that the discipline services votes were not stamped. Can you shed some light on that so that myself and viewers can understand, what that means in that sense?
Yes, that actually was one of the talking points that the incumbent tried to indicate during the recount process. They raised a lot of what they called issues and anomalies during the recount to try to put a negative light onto the voting process that occurred on election day. One of the things that they raised was the discipline services. They tried to say were disenfranchised because the way they spun it, they said the majority of the ballots for the discipline services were not stamped. Now, ballots are rejected during the count at the close of polling day based on a few factors. Someone might have signed their name and identified themselves on the ballot, that there cannot be accepted as a valid ballot. Someone might not have ticked or X'd for any of the parties, or someone might have put a mark for more than one party, or they put their mark outside of the box and nowhere close to a party's name, so it is unclear. And the other way that a ballot has to be rejected, and this is by law, is if there's no stamp, no polling station identification stamp on the piece of paper. If during the count a ballot paper has no identification mark, it has to be rejected, right? But in order to fully explain to you the discipline services ballot, I think I should probably tell you the process a bit more.
Sure.
So that we understand. The discipline services, they vote a week before election, right? So GCOM would go to the various stations and bases, police bases, army bases, and they would have a mini election, but only the discipline services are voting. This is so that they're available to do their security work on election day when we vote. So their names are extracted from the list of electors, the ordinary list of electors, and where they live, because their names would be in the area that they live. And those lists are taken to the polling stations. They go, they vote, and then their ballot papers, it's not stamped to the polling station at that point. It's folded so nobody can see who they voted for, and then placed in an envelope. Each ballot has its own envelope and sealed. And then it's locked up securely and sealed in a box for polling day. Now, their names, once they voted, would then be scratched off on the list of electors or the OLE or the pink slip for the area in which they live and is registered to vote. So a line is drawn through their name on that list so that on election day, our day, they cannot go to the polling station and say, let me vote again, because they would have already voted during discipline service day. So on election day, all these envelopes, these separate envelopes, sorry, with the separate ballots are taken and distributed to different polling stations around the country, which GCOM designates. So GCOM chooses these various polling stations, and they would send like about 35, 36, ballots to these stations to be intermixed with our ballots during election day, and then counted at the end. Now, the ballots themselves, the paper that the police voted on, are identical to the ones that we vote on. They have the same security features. All the ballots throughout the country, they more or less have one color that we vote on. But they differ from region to region, where at the top they have the heading, the regional, that belong to whether it's region 3 or region 4. And then the list of parties on the ballot would vary from region to region, depending on which parties contested which region. So, for example, TCI contested 6 of the regions, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10. So our name would only apply on appear on the ballots for these regions. Region 7, Region 8, Region 1, our TCI name would not have appeared on the ballots there. So the police ballots, our ballots, they're all identical, the same paper and everything also. But the procedure for intermixing of the police ballots at the station is clearly outlined in the GCOM training manual, and training is carried out with each presiding officer on the procedure. The procedure clearly states that before 6 p.m. close of play, the ballots shall be intermixed with our ballots in the box. The procedure for this, and during the training, it's normally advised that this procedure be done during slack time for the station when not a lot of people are there to vote. So the procedure states that the presiding officer has to announce to everyone in the station that he is now going to intermix the discipline services ballots into the box with the electors' ballots. And he calls everyone to observe the process. And then he takes the envelope with all the discipline ballots envelopes, and he opens it. He takes out each envelope that contains a discipline service ballot. He opens that envelope, takes out the discipline service ballot. He stamps it with the station stamp, and then he drops it in the box. Now, he does this and asks everyone to observe the procedure. So everyone in the station, which would include any local or international observer at the time, the party agents at each station, PPP would have had at least one party agent, APNO would have had at least one party agents, right? Agent, 1 and 2 other parties might have had an agent, but the 2 bigger parties definitely would have had at least one agent overlooking the procedure for the entire day to ensure that everything went according to how it should have gone. So because of this procedure, it's very hard to not stamp a discipline service ballot and drop it in the box. If a party agent is there and see, the presiding officer say, we're going to stamp these ballots and drop them in the box, and then don't do so, then obviously they would have to raise an objection. So because that's willful disenfranchisement there. So so to say that the discipline service, were disenfranchised and deliberately so was erroneous. Now, also, the discovery during the counting of the ballots at the end of the voting day is when you discover the anomalies, like people voting more than once, or that a ballot wasn't actually stamped. When the discipline service ballot goes into that box, you cannot at that point any longer distinguish it from our ballot. They're identical. So during the count, if you discover any ballot that is not stamped, you cannot say for certain whether it's a discipline service ballot or whether it's one of our ballots.
Oh, okay.
You know, so that talking point about discipline services being disenfranchised was not something that one could say, you know, yes, there's a willful case of deliberate fraud to disenfranchise them. And when you look at the overall results too, for the amount of rejected overall ballots to the total valid votes cast, you know, 450 something thousand votes cast, and only 4,000 rejected. And of the 4,000 rejected, only a few hundred were rejected for want of official stamp. You know, so we need to consider 8,300 and something police voted and discipline services voted on that day, and just a few hundred were rejected for want of ballot. You can't say the majority of them were disenfranchised, you know, it's just not the case.
All right. So thank you for taking the time to answer that. Of course, we're going to take the opportunity to ask you a few more questions because there are quite a few things that came up by the APNU AFC coalition.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we want to take the opportunity to get some first-hand information, so to speak, from somebody who's kind of seen that whole recounting process and so on. But I want to remind our viewers that they're listening to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat, and there are a few different ways to listen to us. You can listen to us on a regular dial, that's the radio, 102.7 CKMS FM. You can listen to us on Rogers digital cable as well, for those of you who have the Rogers digital box. And of course, we are live stream or Chit Chat, so do take the opportunity to share a page. One of the other thing that came up as well to Nyall, you know, there were a lot of talks about migrated individuals and dead people and all of that voted. Can you maybe add to that and help us understand that? Because if somebody can make that work, and I would love to learn that trick, because I'm a politician here in Canada too. And if I can get dead people to vote for me, I will be the next prime minister here in Canada. So explain that to me.
It came as a shock in the recount station when you're in there. Here, the recount came about. Let me say how the recount came about. You know, as we all know, we went to polls on the 2nd of March, and then by the 3rd of March, at the end of polls, what happens is after the count is done, the presiding officer does up a document called a statement of poll. This is a summary of the tally of all the votes cast for each party. So for each polling station, they will create a statement of poll, and it will say, you know, APNU got X votes, PPP got X votes, TCI got X votes, and there's a summary, and then it will have also the summary of the rejected ballots and the total ballots cast, and then another signature section where all the people present, the party agents and everyone, and so were present in the polling station will sign as witness that this is a true account of what we saw. That statement of poll, multiple copies of it are made so that the GCOM official gets one goes into the sealed envelope, one goes into the box, one goes for the returning officer, a copy goes to the returning officer, and then a copy is nailed to the wall outside of the polling station so that everybody in the area.
I've seen some of those, you know. I've seen some of those ones in the wall, just so you know.
Yeah, exactly. And so you know, the TCI party, we would have told all our candidates, you know, take a picture of the statement of poll that goes up in the area of your wall, because we didn't have people to be in the station observing the event all day. And so what we just started collecting statement of polls. And then we had, you know, friends and families send copies from their area to us. And so we collected quite a few of them. PPP obviously would have collected them all. So the very next day, PPP would have done a total and a tally and realized, you know, we won this thing.
Yeah.
APNO obviously would have known that and so, but they declare, hey, we win.
Mhm.
But then they want to show the statement of poll, and then the returning officer, on 5th of March, Mingo, after much protest and so from the various party agents and so, he would have presented some numbers which didn't coincide with anybody's statement of polls, and he declared a result and win for APNO. Um, so then there were the subsequent injunctions and court cases where the Chief Justice would have instructed him to complete the count properly with the correct statement of polls displayed so everyone can see, and and let the true numbers be reflected. He didn't do that again, and that was another fiasco.
Mhm.
And made a second declaration. Um, and on the 13th of March, um, of course, PNC celebrated a second time that they won based on this false declaration and so.
Mhm.
But by that time, from the 11th to the 12th, the Barbadian Prime Minister Mia Mottley, she would have seen the fiasco being played out, and so she was in the country and she was talking to uh, uh, Barjatio and President Granger, and she, told them, look, there are a lot of questions surrounding these numbers and the non-existence of say statement of polls from either GCOM or the APNUCAM. So she brokered a deal and said, let's do a full recount. And so it was agreed that recount of all the ballot boxes will be done in a transparent manner, in a public manner with everybody around so we could see, what are the true numbers. Of course, immediately after that this was agreed and decided, a court case by a citizen to halt the recount was launched. She turned out to be, of course, an APNU candidate and rep.
Mhm.
Our lawyers were APNU candidates and reps, but APNU distanced themselves from our case,
Of course, of course, of
yeah,
course.
yeah, and so we know that eventually she actually won it because her case was that CARICOM cannot supervise GCOM. The way the recount order was initially written was that CARICOM is here to supervise GCOM. Of course, nobody has that power. Can't direct GCOM what to do.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was agreed to do up the order that CARICOM would be present, but they would be present with observer status, to observe that the recount is carried out and what observations were made during the recount.
I'm not cutting you, but I know that the CARICOM people, they are, they weren't there to necessarily supervise, but if they were to being there to supervise, they would have done a better job. But anyway, go ahead. No,
No,
it's just my opinion there about
yeah,
something, and I
yeah,
know it's something totally different. But you
they
go
did
ahead.
an excellent job, I think, actually. Witnessing them there, they were very, very professional. They didn't speak to us, they would visit all the stations. We saw from the report that they submitted on the 14th, I think, to everyone that they only observed 18.8% of the boxes. That is the full procedure of going through the what became an audit of the ballot box. It wasn't just a recount, it became a ballot box audit. Every single piece of paper that was in that ballot box, we opened and checked and counted and, made notes what was there. And so CARICOM, amazingly for a three-man team, the amount of hard work that they put in there, you know, by the selection, the statistical selection of a sample, you know, they only needed to look at 330 boxes if they wanted a 95% accuracy, plus or minus 5% statistical sampling. But they actually did 420 boxes, which is 18.8. So it was actually better statistical sampling that they needed to do, you know. So they would have been in all the various stations, you know, going from station to station, interchanging, checking, going through these boxes to see what the procedure was, what the finding was for these boxes, what went on election day for these various regions, for these various polling places and so. And then in the afternoon, when the tabulation center did the tabulation of all the boxes that were counted, they would go in the tabulation center and then they would now look and watch each box observation report come in and what occurred from all the boxes. So, you know, you can't say that they only witnessed 18% of the boxes, you know, because they were in the tabulation center and they saw what went on with all the other boxes, you know, for that evening. So they worked very hard and they were able, I mean, they probably have a better understanding of the process than I do, and I was involved in it, you know, so intimately, you know.
So how this whole
right,
this whole thing came about? I guess that's where you're
yes.
getting at now, kind of thing. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
So the procedure was to bring up the box into the recount station. They were all locked away in containers, and from the election night until the recount started, all the containers with all the boxes, they would have been one time at GCOM compound. Then they would have come to the Artichon Conference Center when the first attempt at a recount was to be made. And then the containers moved back to GCOM. And then when the second recount started, they came back to Artichon Conference Center. So those containers probably traveled more parts of Guyana than Guyanese themselves, you know, the amount of traveling they did. But between election day to the recount when it started, those containers and ballot boxes were under constant guard. People online started referring to the ones guarding them as the guardians of democracy, you know, and quite a bit of noise was made about this so online. But eyes were not taken off of these boxes and containers from election night to the recount, so that they could not be tampered with or destroyed or at least without someone seeing. You know, so when they were brought into the room, you know, they came up and then we would look at the boxes and ensure that all the seals placed on election night were intact and that the boxes were in fact intact and no tampering was done with them. Then we would break the seals, open it, and go through the contents. The first time the PNC raised the objections, you know, the rep just sat in the room and I'd like to object to, and he called out a string of serial numbers. These people voted, you know, they migrated, you know. It was a stunning moment because for the recount started, what, 3 months, 2 months, 2 months after the election, you know, and all of a sudden APNU decide we objecting to these people voting. So, you know, the room was just shocked. What happened these last 60 days that no objections were raised, that you're now raising the recount? Was this going on? So the very first objections we could have done is, you know, like, that makes no sense, you know, that their voting process is very stringent. Why are you objecting now? You would have had an agent present on election day at each polling station, and if the agent would have seen a dead person walking, or a ghost, or somebody who isn't on the list coming to vote, they would have raised an objection then. But then you say, it was impersonation. So somebody impersonated somebody on the list and vote. So again, that was a jarring experience, because when you think about the actual voting process on election day.
So hold on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you pause for a second, because what happened? I do have a surprise guest. I'm gonna, of course, get you to continue on with this, but I do have a surprise guest. I just want to make sure we're not losing him or her.
Okay.
He or she will kind of join this conversation as well too. So if you don't mind, close your eyes or so, and because I want it right away.
Let me look away.
Look away while I'm bringing our surprise guest tonight. And then we'll kind of continue the conversation here on Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. And so we should be able to get him or her. So I can see, but I cannot hear you. Cannot hear yet. So okay, there you go. Good. Hello there. So you can look. You can look now. I know. Good. All right.
I thought this would have been Nyall alone for TCI tonight. I didn't know Madam President was coming on.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
So now my boss, so I have to watch what I have to say now.
That's right. So she was keeping an eye on you behind the scenes, So, but Rae, thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. So nice to have you back again tonight. Obviously, the conversation will be a little bit different, because we're still waiting. Last time when you were here, we were talking about waiting, getting prepared for the recount and all of that. So, is there anything? I'm assuming you were looking at the show from the beginning too, right?
I was.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add in the meantime while you're here? Because you guys obviously from the same team, kind of thing. You yourself are part of this whole recounting and all of that. Is there anything? Is he accurate so far?
Nyall has been one of TCI's strongest soldiers. I think after me, Nyall has spent the most time at the ACC. He was a recount station 9 specialist, and I'm sure he would have said to you that what we were trying to do is to make a very private count, very public. So Nyall and myself, along with other members of TCI, would have been using that opportunity to educate the public, try as much as possible to dispel propaganda as it emerged. I heard Nyall mention about the discipline services ballots, which to this day persons are still doubting, that their votes were counted. So Nyall, whatever Nyall said to you, it would have been, because I heard in between, it would have been an accurate representation based on Station 9. I was our tabulation agent, and so from time to time I would pop into stations, where I felt I needed to see as the regions emerged, and so I was able to sit in on every single region we contested and to get a first-hand eye as to what was happening there. But I was our tab agent, so from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 6:30, I sat through, I heard every single observation report for every single region. I saw every number tabulated, and those numbers were the ones that, everybody was on our website every evening at 6:45, waiting patiently to see the new numbers being tallied. I remember one evening, we were having some difficulty with the website and getting the numbers up, and I cannot begin to tell you how many persons quarreled with us. So much that when the numbers finally got up, they're like, finally, you did it. So yes, we had a bird's eye view. I don't know, I might have missed this part of the conversation, but as you know, today the Court of Appeal would have indicated that they would have heard a matter, and they allowed multiple opposition parties to be respondent to the case. And so our TCI is being represented by Mr. Kashir Khan, along with, we're co-joined with Change Guyana. So we have a trio of lawyers representing us, led by Mr. Kashir Khan. And he is currently prepping our submissions for that court matter tomorrow at 6 a.m.
That's right.
Which we will hear at 11 a.m. But I think the biggest bombshell, and I'm not sure if Nyall knows this as yet because he's been on here, is that we just saw the submissions from the GCOM chair.
Oh.
And so she has basically said in her affidavits to the court, and I presume which will be sent to them or has been sent to them at this point, that GCOM has not completed the process. And therefore, Articles 177.4, which, you know, the initial applicant would have submitted their claim under, is not applicable. And in addition to that, all of these matters need an elections petition in order to determine quite a few things. The most, go ahead, the most amusing thing out of it, however, was her saying to them, you know, she gave all this court cases to support her, you know, her applications. It was very, you know, a layman could have understood it,
of course,
to some extent. But you understand now why the position of the GCOM chair requires someone who is either a judge or a former judge. It requires you know, an intense understanding of all of those court laws. Sorry, not court laws, but the electoral laws that govern our system. So that's where we're at. That's the bombshell for tonight. And in fact, I just saw as well, and this one is coming from the Justice for All party, who is a junior partner in a partnership in APNU, and they have conceded.
No.
And so they've said, Mr.
I'm glad to have you. I'm glad to have you on here. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes. So he has said, you know, that based on the recount that that was sent through, I did hear Nyall talking to you about the CARICOM report. That it is clear that the winner is the People's Progressive Party Civic, and as such, he's actually appealed for persons who are, you know, prolonging this process.
Prolonging it, that's right.
To end it, and so that because we're facing a pandemic and we need to be able to, you know, get on with it. So those are the things that have, you know, at this point we don't know what tomorrow will bring. But the GCOM chair has clearly stated her position, and one party in the partnership has said, you know what, let's just end this and be done with it. So we'll see how it goes. We have a tense nation across here, so we're waiting.
You know, it has been tense since March, but I have to tell you for sure, now it's getting really there now. It's kind of getting really to the edge, you know. So you're right. Let's see what happens tomorrow for sure. But I wasn't expecting this really nice update. So I'm glad that you have it, Corin, because I missed all of those pieces because we're here. We're here talking about it.
I think just before we saw the chair submissions, just before Nyall would have come on. And so I know he saw that, but I know he wouldn't have seen the second one as yet because he would have already been on here.
For sure, for sure. So what we would like to do, we would like you to stay up to the end if you can. And I want to remind people that our surprise guest, for those of you who probably don't know, because you have different name on there, this is our surprise guest, Rae Lam. That's the name she's going by, as you can see on the screen. But she is the party leader and presidential candidate for the Citizenship Initiative Party. I just thought I'd mention that just in case if some people, not everybody follow along politics, you know, just so you guys know. Like we are on it because we this is what we do kind of thing. But some people still, you know, are not necessarily following along through the social media. But because we will be broadcasting our show on radio and TV and so on, we want to make sure they kind of understand it and they kind of get it. So another question I have for Nyall, Joe, and I mean, Rae, feel free to jump in at any time as well too. My understanding, there were some mixed up with ballots as well, meaning that like region 4 end up in region 5 and so on. Is there such of a thing that took place, or is it possible?
Yeah, on Facebook, I was Rhonda. I call her Rhonda. Yeah. Anyway, as Rhonda indicated, a lot of these talking points and irregularities and anomalies that were raised, the conversation was possible because the people and the process, it was not as transparent as it should be. The people are not, all voter education process needs to be tremendously improved. So everyone is aware of what exactly happened. And this is what TCI, Rhonda, myself, Shaz, Delon, Vima, all the other agents that were there, we wrote extensively on Facebook and we posted while we were in the station. And so what we were seeing as we went along, and so people could follow and they could learn the process too. And so when we heard the whisper that another region ballot found in another box, I was shocked. The first day I heard it, it was like, how is this possible? Here we are, we're in all the various different regions station, we're counting these ballot boxes, but we're not seeing this thing. But we're seeing the observation reports being made, and of course, when the claims are being made, they're just claims. Nobody is coming up and saying, we saw in box X that region 3 ballot came in region 4 and so. And it's like, where's the evidence? Like all the other issues raised, no evidence coming forth and so on. Then one day, I was watching the pile of ballots being counted and then spotted what appeared to be a strange one. I said, hold on, put the one back. And we put it back, and it's like, there's a region 3 ballot staring at me. I was like, huh, all right, good evidence. I see this with my own eyes now. Here we have a case, and maybe this big shout of fraud and misbehaving, and so here I am seeing something actually happen with my own eyes. And I watched this region 3 ballot, and it's like, yes, I start celebrating the Station 9. And then the PPP rep, Kanga Pasada, he is very experienced. He turned to me and said, hey, sit down there, don't get too excited. Let me remind you that this box that we're looking at has an intermix of voters from overseas. So I was like, what do you mean? Because I'm now seeing this, I'm learning the process, and I'm like, what's going on? He said that how people outside of Guyana doing work for Guyana, like in the embassies or those things, and so they're allowed to vote, and their vote is put in a sealed envelope, just like the discipline services envelope individually, and it's sent back. Now, when it's sent back, it should be sent to the polling station closest to where they live. So say one of them live in region 3, his vote goes into the envelope, it should be sent to region 3. But these ballots are sealed in envelopes. Nobody can see whether they're marked region 3 or region 4. So during the distribution in GCOM's office, it's easy and it's possible that they could take a region 3 ballot from these overseas voting and put it in a region 4. So while, yes, we did see ballots from a different region arrive, in a different region, it wasn't a case of fraud, or for ballot box stuffing or so. It was just administrative error, because obviously nobody can open those envelopes to verify this is the region 3 ballot, and because they would have to see where the vote is and everything. And so you can't tamper with a ballot like that. The only time that envelope could be open is when it's going to be intermixed and dropped straight into the ballot box, and it's not discovered who which region it is for until it is counted. So what happened is that particular ballot was taken up to the commission. Their office would have been, they had the commission's office, and they would have looked at the box and seen that, yes, there was an intermix of overseas voters for this particular box. So more than likely what happened, this was a region 3 overseas voter, and it has to be a valid vote and counted, for the party for this particular box. And that was that incident. So that was for that particular question. the anomalies with the migrated and dead voters, and so again, the lack of understanding of our procedure allow these kinds of talking points to be made. Our voting procedure on election day has a lot of checks and balances. At each station, they have the ordinary list of electors. What is printed on pink paper is called a pink slip. And this has a list of all the eligible voters who can vote at that station on that day, right? Besides the pink slip with a list of names, there's what is called a folio, multiple copies. I think we were seeing like 30 copies of each document that's available. Every person who's working in each polling station gets a copy available to them, including party agents. They have the folio, and the folio basically is the pink list, but it has additional details for each elector, including a photograph of the elector. Oh, wow. So everybody in the station has these documents. So when you go to vote, you present your ID card. The person that collects your ID card would shout out your name in loud in the station, and then everybody there goes through their pink slip and their folio, and they check your face and they check your details, your name, and ensure that you're there. So this is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people checking up on you that you are who you say you are. Then you go up, you collect your ballot paper, they check your fingers to see if you have ink stain on it already, indicating that you would have voted previously. So that's another check and balance there too, they show you, they stamp the paper, they give it to you, they show you how to fold it and mark it and everything. You go, you vote, you come back, you drop it in a box, and then everybody in the station takes off your name on a pink slip, this person voted. So you can't come back later in the day and say, I ain't voted yet, because you already ticked off, So that procedure, that scrutiny that everyone goes through, it is hard for someone to say they really impersonate, somebody and change a shirt and things. You don't ink your finger, and so obviously if you can use bleach to wash it off, everybody knows how bleach smells. The bleach smell is behind you for a long time, and it doesn't even completely wash off the ink anyway. So if you walk in a station full of smelling of bleach, you change your shirt, trying to look like somebody else and stuff, they can pick you up quite easily.
Yes, it's not easy to do, for sure. Go ahead.
Here's another twist to that story. There's something called a tendered ballot. So let's just say you showed up and they have you ticked. But your hands, you've managed to take the ink off your hands, all of these issues. Mm-hmm. What happens is because they've had you ticked, and remember, as Nyall said, everybody shouts out your name and everybody ticks off the process. Now, what we did notice in all of the stations we were in is that those lists weren't always completed. So people got tired, they might have missed a couple of numbers, those kinds of things. But what is important about the tendered ballot is if you show up and claim that you've not voted, but obviously your finger is not inked, but they have a record, when they check with everybody else in the room, everybody has a record that this person had voted. What they essentially make you do is to swear to an oath of identity, and then they issue something called a tendered ballot. So you go through the process of it being, you voted, they stain your fingers again or whatever. However, that ballot will not be counted at the end of the process because you have essentially presented yourself when they have proof that you are voted, but that ink finger is not present. So even in cases like that, given the kind of follow through that we would see in terms of from the time you enter that polling station, there are steps that have to be taken. And I'm going to be frank with you. What we saw and Nyall can attest to this, a lot of it was a lack of following of standard operating procedures by GCOM staff, which means, therefore, it's an indictment on the staff themselves. Did they follow their SOPs? And I mean, SOPs is the wrong term to use these days.
Yeah,
but everybody would have standard operating procedures to follow through. For instance, when we got to the East Coast, you had all these boxes missing statutory documents. And literally the first box that popped up in, they can't find this. And we were alarmed because, like Nyall was saying, yes, at this point, I'm like, something is not right here. But then a DRO jumps out and says, listen, I received instructions from, and he called names. He named himself. And then a PO jumped in, and from one of the schools that was being questioned, she said, listen, I received these instructions and I followed them. And persons were saying, well, why didn't you follow through your SOPs? And she's saying, but the DRO gave me additional instructions. And at that point, if your immediate boss is giving you instructions, and she said it came just before close of play. Then we came now to another ballot box whereby the person said, 72 ballots were unused ballots were missing. And the PO says, I got instructions. And he forwarded screenshots of the messages he would have received from the chat group. And I remember saying to one of our members, who was now the editor of a newspaper, I said, can you investigate this for us? Can you check to see if these WhatsApp messages are truthful, because persons can fake things. And he says, I saw them, we investigated it, because they did an entire article on it. Then, these claims of dead and migrant voters, do you know that they objected to every single lamb in my box except me? They sent a list. It's almost like if they objected, because Nyall was in the room and he's messaging me and he's saying, do you know this person? Do you know this person? Yeah, that's an uncle, that's an aunt, that's a cousin, And we're cracking up because I said, well, if they object to 245, that's me. And I, just let me know and I'll roll in there and say what I have to say. But we had a situation whereby a list of 172 names were sent to the Commissioner of Police. And he wrote back and he says, these amount of people were not present in the country. And what ended up happening? 30 plus people, 8 of them who I know personally and know that they voted. They have the evidence on their timeline. They were queried as being out of the jurisdiction. We had another incident whereby 3 people, that certificates appeared for them. And of course, it was a big furor because we're checking now, we have all the observation reports. No allegations were made against this person. Clearly, the death certificate that they had for one lady, it was a lady with a similar name, but she had died years ago. So every time we went fact checking, and I'm talking about TCI here, not anybody else. Anytime we attempted to use information that was placed in the public domain, and we attempted to prove it right or wrong, or in that sense, to give credence to it, we could find no evidence. There was always something staring us down in the face to either plausibly explain it or to just literally say, to give us pause and say, something's not right here. Something is not making sense. And then, of course, the fact that GCOM counted those ballots in the end meant that, they either had credible information to say, well, this is the scenario, or it was a case of where is GCOM situations that had flawed processes, and the voter should not be disenfranchised for that. Absolutely. So all in all, whilst the recount has brought to light a number of anomalies, missing poll books, these kinds of things, what we saw was the willingness to use propaganda to argue and to put things into the public domain that were we not present in that recount to counter them. We would have 8,000 plus, some of them still believe it, 8,000 plus disciplined services who believe that their votes were not counted. And even after placing that evidence in the domain, that I did it myself. I went looking, I went every single station where there was an intermix. If I found 58 ballots in those stations for lack of stamping, I found a lot. Where the worst and the most egregious, and you can't blame anybody else but the PO for that, and those people were disenfranchised, was a nursery school in Sophia. And then there was one at Ogle called Plindola Nursery, where literally at Sophia, the APO folded the ballots incorrectly. So when they stamped top and bottom, essentially what they were doing is stamping the top and bottom of the bottom half. So the general half of the ballot never received the official mark. And by the time the PO recognized it, 80-something plus persons had voted. The one, and there's a note in the poll book to tell us that. The one at Prindole and Nursery, that was even worse. That was 120 something people plus. So where we saw, and I wouldn't even call it deliberate, where we saw GCOM errors of disenfranchisement by persons, it actually came from those stampings, and those were two glaring anomalies in that sense. But nothing we saw spoke to a systematic fraud or anything like that. I mean, this is what was presented to us.
Yeah,
go ahead.
If I could add too, they talk about missing poll books. The poll books are never placed in the ballot box. So when they said the poll books are missing from the ballot boxes, that just can't be, because the poll books are never placed in the ballot boxes. They're sealed separately in separate envelopes after the ballot boxes are sealed. Now, the reason why the poll books aren't placed in the ballot box, because like a diary, the poll book is like a diary. It keeps a record of what transpired during the day and so. They have to make an entry in the poll book what time the ballot box was sealed. So obviously you can't make an entry in the poll book and then seal the ballot box, So the poll books now, the certificates of appointments for GCOM staff who would have worked there and voted at that station when they lived somewhere else, the oaths of identities for the people who would not have collected ID cards but gone to vote and were verified according to the folios and the pink list as I described earlier. Those oaths and oaths of the blind, people or incapacitated, or oaths of a friend, all of those are placed in the poll books and then sealed and sent on to the regional officer. So GCOM, the administrative office, they would have all those poll books there separate from the ballot boxes. So when they started making noise about missing poll books from boxes, it was a play, is that GCOM didn't produce the poll book because it probably buried in some office somewhere for that box. So the first thing they had is like, oh, poll book's missing from the box, but the poll book wasn't missing from the box, So the way they played on the words and they raised the different issues, our lack of knowledge of the system, we would think, a lot of skullduggery and fraud and so is happening. And another thing that I would have picked up as we spent time in the station and so we thought about these kinds of errors that we were seeing. The ballot count for the votes for each part cast was accurate on the statement of poll and the recount, but during the recount, we found, say, APNO ballot in a PPP envelope or PPP ballot in an APNO envelope. But the count would have already been done. It's just they would have been placed in the wrong envelope, wrong labeled envelope by accident. We have to think that these people would have been working since before 6 in the morning to get, wake up, come out of the house, go to the station. And then they spent all day, they close off at 6 in the afternoon, very high stress situation, limited breaks, limited meals, tired people that had to deal with hundreds and hundreds of people, different personalities, different kind of stress occurring during the day. It's not a normal working day for anybody. And so when they start, packing back and packing up these documents, we finally done count, we tired, we want to go home and sleep. And 1 or 2 administrative errors will occur, so what we call anomalies and irregularities is we have to, these are human beings make mistakes, To top it all off, as Rhonda said, the presiding officer, and so a lot of new ones would have been hired, so they're inexperienced. And their training, it highlighted that the training that GCOM would have administered for all these various people it's just not standard, because you have multiple regional officers training multiple people throughout the country. So the training will not be as standard as it should be. So you will see administrative errors and 1 and 2 different practices occurring, and as Rhonda explained earlier, just the willful change of the procedure departing from packing the statutory documents in the box and sending it directly on. That there was orders that came from above that they were forced to comply with, you know. So when all these anomalies and irregularities are raised, is human error, lack of training, lack of experience, and so. But then, of course, there would have been like the outright lies where you heard about ballots having different colors, you know, for different regions, and so that simply wasn't true. You know, all the ballots the same colors throughout. And so the only difference they would have had was the list of parties on them, because all the parties in that contest in all the regions. And then at the top of them, they would have the region on them. But if you were to look at the ballot from a distance, you can differentiate it by a color or so. The only color different ones with a different color was tendered ballots, which Rhonda explained, are not used in the final count. You know, so the CARICOM report.
The regional ballots had a slightly different hue.
Shade, yeah.
But
yeah.
I mean,
but they
and
didn't
that's,
differ
of course,
from region to region.
Correct.
They differed from
all
the general.
regions, the colors were the same. It's just that
Exactly.
to differentiate the regional ballots from the
general.
From the
but
general.
each ballot, they did have a security feature on them that was only detectable under blue light. You know, and for each box, the procedure was every single ballot, the GCOM staff scanned each one to ensure that that security feature was there, so that, you know, you didn't find somebody with a regular piece of paper in it to mark an X and so. So throughout the recount, not a single instance of a ballot not having that security feature that was visible under the blue light was discovered, you know. Not a single instance of overstuffing where we deliver to each station the list. If the ordinary list has 300 voters on it, they should deliver 300 ballots to that station, and up to 300 people can vote. We did not find a single instance where, you know, 400 people instead of 300 people, 400 ballots inside a box, you know, instead of up to 300. You know, so there was no overstuffing issues or anything like that, you know. There were cases raised about counterfiles or multiple serial numbers on the counterfiles. So like everybody has a serial number. Rhonda's one was 245. So say Rhonda had went in and she somehow or the other spoiled her ballot and asked for a do-over. Look, I make a mistake, I scratched too long or something. I spoiled my ballot. I would like a new ballot paper to vote again. What they will do is when you tear out the ballot from the book, it leaves a counterfile. They would have written on that counterfile 245 for Rhonda and given her ballot to vote. When she gets her new ballot, the new counterfile, they have to write 245 again. But on the first one, they put a scratch and they write canceled. So that shows. Now, not in 100% of cases was the word canceled written on. But we were able to corroborate that a spoiled ballot was there because the spoiled ballot envelope, the spoiled ballot in it is marked spoiled, right? And the tabulation records and the notes in the poll book indicate that, you know, ballot was spoiled. So at that point, Rhonda's name, her number would have appeared on 2 counterfiles. So yes, they did see instances of multiple counterfiles having the same number, but it was because of spoiled ballot. It wasn't fraud. Every single thing, you know, we asked, I was in the station and I was asked, you know, please provide this evidence. You know, I'm willing to be the first person to go shout to the world, here is credible evidence of fraud. The message was, we will provide the evidence at a strategic point in time in the future, you know, on these anomalies.
So as I understand it from both of you, the recount, will it be fair for us to say it was a credible recount kind of thing, the result, that is?
Absolutely, yes.
On the numbers we saw in terms of ballots in a box, nobody ever said, like Nyall was saying, that the ballots were stuffed, any of the ballots were fake. So based on a numerical recount, absolutely, those are valid ballots. in addition, what we saw as well, a lot of parties benefited and a lot of parties lost votes. Because as Nyall said, but for the most part, when you look at the counts for 9 regions, given the margin of error, either up or down, 9 regions came back within that margin of error based on the original declarations. It was just region 4 where when those counts were adjusted, the margin of error had exploded.
For sure.
Because what you had was the PPP's votes being subtracted by 3,000 plus votes and APNU AFC being inflated by 19,000 votes. In some instances, when you looked, as Nyall said, when you looked at those ballot boxes where they were inflated, it was even more than the registered voters in the box.
Oh, really?
So,
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes, based on a numerical, statistical, any way you want to look at it from that end, valid ballots counted. In some instances, there were anomalies in terms, and that's for GCOM. Because if you have a valid ballot in there and you had a rep there who signed off on all of this, and this is the part where we were shocked, because every single big party, both the government, both the current opposition, had an agent in there. But I'm literally sitting here trying to figure out how 16 ballots for the APNU AFC ended up in the PPP count. And it wasn't a case where we saw before, it was a case of, a 1 vote went over there, but when you put it in the correct envelope, it didn't affect the numbers. This was 16 votes that had to be subtracted from a PPP thing. So at that point, I could say somebody tried a little thing maybe, but even so, that would be me speculating.
For sure.
It could have been an honest mistake and nobody thinks, because even at the recount itself, ballots that had an X on the sign that were originally rejected, and people saying, no, there's a mark on that cup, or there's a mark on that key, or there's a mark on that flower. And so what it boiled down to is a lack of voter education, because we literally only educate our voters a couple of mornings before the election starts.
Correct.
And the rules are so stringent. If that ballot doesn't have a stamp, if the mark is not clear, all of these things, what we saw were POs erring on the side of caution and rejecting the ballot completely, just in case. So what the recount did was actually add more persons to the franchise. But that region 4 declaration, again, it was the only thing that we saw that we could safely say that it was such a great anomaly that we couldn't ignore it. But everything else, there was a logical explanation for it. There was, some kind of paperwork to support it. And that's where we're at. We tried to prove everything that they put into the public domain. And I said to Nyall, I said to Shaz, I said to Ruel, I said to everybody, let's prove it. Let's investigate it. Let's go looking for it. And every time we went looking, we found totally different evidence.
And also too, we, like I had explained earlier, we collected, all the subs, the statement of polls that would be posted up in our areas and everything. So we had quite a lot of Region 4 statement, probably just under 25% of the Region 4 statement of polls. And so
No, we had more than that, Nyall.
More than that.
I went into the second, the first time, the first declaration, we had 200 SOPs from
I remember that
Region
number.
4. By the time we rolled around to the second declaration, which was just about a week later, I literally had half of those SOPs in my possession. Because what we did was, after persons started to discredit and they said, oh, the PPP gave it to us and all of that, we said, here what? So we made a public appeal. We created a website for persons to submit their SOPs from their areas. And then one evening, Ruel and a couple of other folks from A New and United Guyana, they drove around the Saturday, going to all of these places to verify that the image we had was the image that was placed outside of that polling station. How we got there? Some matched, some we were told were taken down and therefore you couldn't verify it, but I still kept it for verification purposes.
Of course.
There were many where the security said to us, we have permission, you're not allowed to come in.
Yeah.
So I kept them as, and so Shaz did a spreadsheet for me, the various ballot boxes. And when those ballot boxes, when we call them the bingo boxes, when those boxes were opened, I was sitting there with my little, because I started to make notes of the numbers they were calling. Because what happened was, as we came down the East Bank, I was audio recording the numbers being called. And I'm saying to Shaz, these numbers are not making sense. Something's wrong. We never thought that we would have the opportunity to prove those numbers incorrect. What happened though, as we came down to the rest, going up to the, into the city and then the East Coast and stuff like that, GCOM realized that we were recording, and so they were standing over us. Wow. And so I had to end the recording. And what I started to do was to make notes on the spreadsheet I had, how much the inflation was and those kinds of things. So what I attempted to do when we got to those boxes in the recount, I attempted to put that on record in the observation report. And the supervisor said, no, we're only dealing with what's in the box. So technically, there is no record of Mingo Bingo except in the media, except where we spoke to, a newspaper, and it was recorded, except where Nyall made notes and Shaz made a comment and Shaz made videos and I made a comment. That does not exist in the GCOM report. So when the CEO made up that whole report and the alternate numbers, he never mentions Mingo. He never mentions that the original declaration for 4 is greatly different to the certified results of 4. So when people are talking about fraud and trying to rig and all of these things, I always start the conversation with, do we acknowledge that Mingo bingoed? If you acknowledge this, we can have a conversation. If you don't acknowledge this, we can't have a rational conversation. So that's where we're at this point.
And we also would have proved out during the recount, all the boxes, all the SOPs that we had matched back to the recount, more or less the recount showed that the SOPs that we would have collected are true and reflection of the votes valid in each box, So we had quite a lot of SOPs too for some of those boxes that they said, statutory documents were missing. But when you compare, we opened up the box, we saw the valid votes. Yes, statutory documents are not there, but we can recount the votes cast in that were in the box, and they match what was on the SOPs, they match our SOPs, they match what was in the statement of recount. So, once the vote tallies are matching, obviously they have to count and they're valid, so the recount tabulation and the recount results, I would say fairly reflects the will of the people of Guyana.
So would you both say that it was a free and fair election there? Then is that fair for us to kind of wrap it up by saying that? For the fact that both of you were involved in the recounting kind of scene,
I would say the tallies, the vote count is free and reflective of the will of the people. Whether it the word or this recount procedure on the observation reports has raised quite a lot of areas where GCOM can change its systems. And so I think this was an excellent performance review of the voting procedures for the day that GCOM can now take it and say, we are able to tighten up on these areas, and we're able to structure our training in such a way that we can prevent or try to limit these things from happening. The system itself is pretty incredible in terms of the checks and balances. So to defeat it would take probably the collusion of the entire station. And then if the entire station is compromised, then you don't need to have people pretending to be dead or pretending to be or migrated to pretending to be somebody else. And so all they got to do when they lock up that station at night is take off a few extra ballots, drop them in a box, and nobody will be any the wiser because the entire station is compromised. But you're talking about 2,339 stations. To have an effect on the numbers, you're talking about hundreds of stations have to be compromised so it could change the results. So if it's hundreds of stations, you've got 6, 7, 10 people in a station, you're talking about thousands of people have to be compromised, bought off in order to affect the results in any great thing. And to have, months and months pass and not a single word slip out of anybody's mouth, oh, I get bribed or something like that, it's incredible. So I have to say that this election, the recount process is a fair reflection of the votes cast, but there are things that need to be worked on that could be fair. There are certain systemic changes that were made, the decision to reduce the number of private residences in the election that one could say is not exactly fair. But then for one to make such a thing, you would have to have proof, so we can submit that, yes, the way it was carried out, was not fair, but that's just talk. But in terms of the results itself, what was tabulated and certified by everybody and Rhonda's signatures on each tabulation that we did reflects the results as they should have been from my point of view.
Excellent, thank you. And how are you, Rhonda? Would you say it was, I know there's no question that there's room for improvement to make it better for next time, 2025. But would you say, based on the recount, the result itself, would you say it was a free and fair election?
I would prefer not to speculate on the terms free and fair for two reasons. One is what is free and fair is disputable depending on where you come from. What I can tell people is that the recount, like Nyall said just now, because we weren't present for the original counts, the recount process was transparent. It highlighted anomalies, yes, which I have said repeatedly, that as long as GCOM remains heavily politicized by status quo politics, we will always have that pulling and tugging. So, but the recount process was transparent. There was no evidence of fake ballots or ballot stuffing that we saw or were privy to, and therefore the numerical count as presented by that recount is an accurate reflection of the ballots found in every single box. And the reason why it's not that I can't speculate or hesitate, but I am cognizant of the fact that there is half of this country who believe that the process was not free and fair, and they have different interpretations for it. However, like Nyall said, we have no evidence in front of us that says differently than those recount numbers that we saw. And we participated in that process, and we can say to you, and we were there, I was there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6:30 at night. The same thing for Nyall, because he would show up, in the evenings to bring his SORs to me and things like that. So ultimately, it was a transparent process, and the vote count, the numbers that we saw emerge, are the numbers reflecting those ballots that we found.
Awesome. No, and very well said. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything else. I just thought getting your, your few words based on the recount, because I mean, there was a reason why the recount, end up getting completed, so to speak, right? And so the fact that both of you were there, I think it was nice for us to hear, from both of you firsthand, because I mean, I can only speak based on what I'm seeing and hearing on there. Depending which side you're looking at, it's a all different ballgame, right? So the fact that both of you were there, I think that's, you both hit it on the nail there. Is there any last word? I have a 10-month-old, so it's my job to take care of her and put her to bed. Is there any last word both of you, would like to say before you leave? But I can assure you we're going to stay in touch, because I'm curious. I have to dig a little bit later to see what's going on. But I'm glad Rhonda took the opportunity to kind of highlight some of the stuff that she has seen that we didn't have a chance to see yet. But any last word, you would like to share and say here? Now's your opportunity.
I'd
I'll
like
let
to,
Nyall go.
yeah. I'd like to thank you for inviting me on your program, giving me the opportunity to speak about my experiences at the Recount. I would have written a bit about it on my social media profile, but this is another opportunity to educate the people to what I saw in the Recount and what's been happening, and to try to allay some of the fears and talks that were going around that weren't an accurate representation of what I would have witnessed. So thank you very much for that opportunity and for having me on your program.
Absolutely. I mean, the input you give us tonight, it was definitely needed to kind of clear some air. So we are forever grateful for that. How about you, Rhonda? Any last thing you'd like to say while we are at it?
It's probably going to be the same thing I said a month ago.
And that's okay. That's okay.
We have a lot of healing to do in this country. This process has brought out a lot of acrimony. It has brought out a lot of, for lack of a better word, the underbelly of our people that is not a pretty sight. We tried to coexist, but this election season has been brutal. Just looking at social media posts, and I cringe and I die a little bit more, and I wonder how we're going to survive. We usually do, but it's never been this acrimonious. It's never been this dirty, at least not in my, recent recollections.
Correct. Yeah.
And so I wonder, how do we move from here? Because what you have now is, based on that recount, a government that is literally unchecked. The numbers are, they have a majority in parliament, and it's not just one seat this time around. So, and even if you combine the opposition, it's still not enough to stop them. And so what I would urge every single person, tonight, is that we've got to hold our government responsible. We have to say to them, listen, we put you there, we can take you back out. And the last 10 years has shown that. Because just how the PPP was taken out 5 years ago, APNU FC was taken out this year. And we've got to say, they have to understand that we can vote them out if they don't perform. This is not 5 years ago. This is not 10 years ago. Social media is prevalent, but at the same time, the incoming government has to govern for all our people. Guyana belongs to all of us. We cannot have half, 49%, or however you want it, thinking that they don't have a voice and they don't have a say in. And so I would love for the incoming government to reach out to the opposition, to, say to them, listen, we would like to invite you to the table. We would like you to be a part of this. It is not hard. It requires a maturity, however, that I've not seen in our politics. And so I am at the point whereby, I told, can't remember who it was, but one of the PPP recount agents, I said, I have a list. I have a list of things I want, and it's probably at 100 right now and mounting. I'm not for myself, of course, but for our people. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, well, you know what to do. And like I've said in every single program, the incoming government is unknown. TCI is here to stay. TCI is here to hold you accountable. And from our very first salvo fired when we see you going wrong, we hope that the other citizens of this country, and the diaspora as well, because many of them come home to vote, hold the government accountable. Until we as citizens participate in our democracy, it is just that, a farce. It is not a citizenry that is the thing. we cannot abrogate our rights to a ballot box vote every 5 years, and then we complain for 5 years and we do nothing about it.
Yep.
So that's where I leave us, and I hope that we have honest conversations with each other and we're able to recover from this prolonged electoral process, which is this is day what, Niall? 100 and somebody?
109 or 10.
110 days of this. And for
Yeah,
us who've been
probably.
campaigning, we've been on the go since December and before, and so it's been a long drawn out process. It needs to end now.
109, yeah.
Yeah, but it's my prediction though. And this is just a prediction, and I've been wrong before. But my prediction is that we'll have a new president's swearing Monday, this coming Monday. So it's my prediction. So you guys can. It's just a prediction. So let's see.
I predicted court cases, and people were upset with me.
Oh,
Because you remember I said that to you a month ago, and I said it 2 days ago. I was on 2 other shows, and I said court cases, and the person said, "You're so fatalistic. You don't give them any ideas." I said, but this is how we roll. This is what
this
we
is
do.
how I know. I totally hear you. I was trying to steer away, but you're right though, because and that's exactly what ended up happening. But you brought up a very good point, both of you. Even after when a new president is sworn in, we still have to be active, and we still have to listen to the concern of the people. The government, definitely, it is extremely important, for them to represent everybody, because once we have a new government, that doesn't mean that everything fixed automatically. I think people have to realize that that I don't want people to think that, okay, we have a new president now, that okay, everything is all perfect, we have a perfect life, we have a job to go to, and so on. We have lots of work ahead of us, but we will keep an eye on things, like we always do. And we wish the Guyanese people nothing but the best. We wish them all success. I know that I have, the two of you are very spirited in a good way in what you do. And I mean, Rhonda, I saw somebody put a comment, and I always look on the bright side of things. So somebody really, or a lot of people are relying on you to kind of continue to do what you do. We need more women in these kinds of roles, as I told you when you were here last time. And I will encourage you to continue to be the voice that you have been, because it's extremely crucial. If we all kind of pull away and we kind of give up, so to speak, I mean, the people will suffer at the end. Not everybody has the courage to do what you guys are doing. I can tell you that for sure. And so people will need people like yourself, to kind of really feel a sense of belong as well too, because not always, the ruling party or the president or or minister will kind of be there. So in a lot of the cases, you guys will end up hearing the issues first from your community. It's going to happen for sure. Yeah. And then you will, both of you and your party members and other people like yourself will still have to be advocates, to advocate for those that are left behind, and so just continue to fight, continue that spirit, I still don't understand it though, in terms of how the politics works in because it's different here. They're like, it's just totally different. We don't have to go there, but we are hoping that it's coming to an end in a good way. But it's very interesting though, just about when I'm thinking that it's all done now, it's all, it's going to be nice for Guyana to move forward, and something else pop up. And if something else pop up, then it means that we still have lots to learn and so on, because I don't know of anything else that could come up now after this whole ball game here. So again, thank you both. Rhonda, I thank you for pulling off this surprise here, and to you, Nyall, I hope that it was a real good surprise for you.
Oh yes.
At a very short notice, Rhonda, you were able to pull it off for me, and that alone shows your commitment and spirit for leadership and for people, and I'm forever grateful for that. So again, I would like to thank both of you. So my dear fellow listeners, as we're approaching the end of tonight's program, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for tuning in to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. On behalf of myself and our two guests, Nyall and Rhonda, we would like to join together and wish you a great today and even a better tomorrow. Do tune in to us again tomorrow, 7 o'clock Eastern time, for another special episode of Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat.
Thank you. Good night.
No problem.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.